Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. We're crazy to think we're actually getting real close to the halfway marker of the 50 most relevant. Number 34 today, we're talking about North Melbourne Kangaroos captain Jack Ziebell. It's been a few days since we've had Kane back. I thought he'd bring him back in for another episode. Hello, mate. How you doing?
Good, thank you, MJ. Jack Ziebell, a guy that I think is a forgotten player in fantasy because he had midfield status for so long and we didn't really pick him, but when you look at the numbers, I think we forgot just how consistent he was for so many years.
Yeah, he's a fascinating player to look at. And again, in the 50 most relevant, we are weighting and factoring all different formats of the game. That's what we love to do here at the Coaches Panel. We play all games of fantasy footy. And so it's not only a SuperCoach or only an AFL fantasy or only a dream team. It's all of them combined. It's why you're seeing some players through the 50 most relevant. You're like, hey, 10 days ago, you did a bloke that I think is way more relevant in AFL fantasy than this guy. That's okay. Conversely, it's the other way around. You might have seen a 40s and go, why is Jack Crisp at 41? MJ, what are you doing? It's because we're using all of the formats, putting them all together to create a universal list so that you as the fantasy footy nut, just like the rest of us here at the Coaches Panel, can be chatting about all of these incredible players. All right, let's get into it. 29 years old. He is listed as a pure forward only for us. And even though he got just a handful of games last year, we did see probably two games that showed some promise for us. It was a 99 in SuperCoach against the Swans. That was his top score last year, while it was a 70 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. You want to adjust that. It's in the early 80s, kind of for you through there. So that's okay. In terms of his career numbers, you are going back earlier in the decade than you probably would like. But again, we're not paying for him to have to deliver these numbers. 156 is his career high AFL Fantasy score. That was against the Western Bulldogs back in 2011, while in 2013, his best SuperCoach score came against the Magpies, a huge 161. In terms of his average, it's a 48 in SuperCoach. It's a 37.6 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. Of course, that's been adjusted for us. If you wanted to multiply that times 1.25, it is a 47, but in AFL Fantasy, we'll talk about that format a little bit later, but they always choose to reward their discount that they do give to a player because he did get an injury discount across all formats. It was awarded to his 2019 average, not so much what he delivered for us right out of the gate. So his 2019 average was an 89.7 in AFL Fantasy. And in fact, we're talking about AFL Fantasy. Before we get any further, let's just, in that format, Kane, let's just put a line through him. The way they've chosen to do those prices, again, for some that think it's right, some think it's wrong, it's universally the same for us all, so it kind of doesn't matter. But at that point, he's priced in the mid 80s. Even if he goes 90, there's guys 100 and 150K cheaper that if they do that, you're making money and getting banking points. Where at this, he needs to go 95 or 100 to really make that selection worthwhile.
Yeah, to keep it simple, MJ, in AF, he is irrelevant for me. And if he was relevant, if he was priced how he's priced in the other formats, which, as you said, it doesn't really matter because we're all playing the same game across it. But for this list purpose, he'd be in the 20s, I'm sure, if he was that price in AF. Maybe even in the top 20. But yeah, to keep it simple for AF, a guy priced in the mid 80s with what I'm foreseeing Ziebell's role and his age and just the makeup of the North Melbourne side, it's a big no for me.
Yep.
But in DT and SuperCoach, like you mentioned, we're not asking him to get back to his prime years. No. We're just asking him to compete with some rookies.
Pretty much at that point in time. Look, 2020 was a pretty messed up year, unfortunately, for a lot of the North Melbourne Footy Club, and for Jack. He spent a lot of the year on the sidelines with injury. Unfortunately, had a lot of really talented teammates sitting alongside there with him. But last year, even just in 3 of the games, these are just some of the injuries that impacted his ability to play through the games and play ultimately in the varying roles that he can for his team. In round 1, was started forward, played forward a lot, injured his medial ligament in that game. The good news is he was able to get back out there for the next few weeks beyond that. But you could even just see, if you rewatch some of those games in round 2, round 3, you could see him heavily strapped, really kind of fighting his way through the game. And even after, remember, round 1, there was like a 3-month layoff. So he's coming back from a medial ligament. long-term injury in that regard. So it's not like, hey, I'm back in 6 days' time. There's months of recovery that's gone in there. He gets back in at round 4, cops a really big knock, Corky, early in the game in the fourth quarter. Club still want him on the ground, need that rotation. They chunk him forward, then pings his hammy late in the game. So he's done. He's out for a month. Round 7, he's back in, comes up against the Tigers. What happens? Hammy goes ping again, and he gets a Cornelio. Yep, that's what we call a donut, a 0 in the fantasy footy community, where you're on the field, nothing happens. So he cops a 0. So yeah, that average that he's been priced at for us in Dream Team and SuperCoach, it's already further impacted in terms of the 0 that's through there. And then he gets back for the last 3 games of the year. So it was a nasty year in 2020, but there was even still some bright spots. Maybe it's round 3 and maybe round 2, Kane. When you look at those games and those stats, again, nothing that's like, oh, wow, he's a captaincy option. But for where he's priced for us in those 2 games, you go, well, that's a handy return for what I'm paying for him at 350 in DT and 250 in SuperCoach.
Oh, he can still score, MJ, for sure. Again, is he going to get the prime role where he used to be one of the prime midfielders alongside Ben Cunnington? I don't think so. Do I think he'll get some opportunity? I think so, because I think it is really important. As much as you want to give, time to the kids, we've seen that it just doesn't work that way. Your best way to develop your side is to try to win as many games as possible. And you've got a new coach. And you can't tell me that having Jack Ziebell in there doesn't give them a better chance to win than a lot of these kids. Again, I understand you've spent high draft picks on them. Yeah. You want to get opportunities into them, but it doesn't have to be straight away in their first season. And there is nothing wrong with building them up. And I'm talking at training, preseason, all this type of stuff. You're not asking Tom Powell and Will Phillips to lead the midfield their first year.
No.
It actually is counterintuitive to their development. I'm sure they'll play a lot of games. But if you've got a guy like Jack Ziebell in there, alongside Cunnington, helping Simpkin, Davies Uniacke, Jed Anderson, third in the best and fairest, had a sensational season. Like, there's enough of a core in that engine room. Again, obviously, a guy like Cunnington would like to play pretty much his whole time on ground in the midfield.
Yeah.
I think Ziebell's a guy that can do a bit of 50-50.
Yeah.
But as I said, you can't underestimate how important it is for North Melbourne to be competitive in games, especially with a new coach. And like you said, mentioned MJ, there's an 89 and a 99 in SuperCoach last year. There's 2 scores in the 80s in there. And those are with mainly, primary forward roles. So really, at his price, MJ, we're talking about a guy that's pretty much at 50 or even the high 40s. Like, here's some names, MJ, in SuperCoach that are more expensive than Jack Ziebell in the forward line.
All right.
Ben Ronk, Josh Corbett, James Bell, Irving Mosquito, Boyd Woodcock, Jaden Hunt.
A good friend of the
Turner.
coaches panel, by the way, Boyd. So hello if you're listening, mate.
Yeah, again, no disrespect to Boyd, but this is Jack Ziebell, who's a premium scorer for the best part of nearly a decade. And Jaden Hunt's just ahead of him as well. See, you're getting Jack Ziebell at $257,900. MJ, what do we want from a cow? Maybe 100, 150 would be very happy with.
Yeah.
150K?
Yeah.
Really? Again, there's no job security concerns. There is
Not
a
in that
potential
price,
ceiling
mate,
that could generate some cash rather quickly. And I think most of what questions we have to be answered will be answered by the time round 1 comes around.
Yeah,
is he
I
fit?
think so. Yeah.
Did he play in the preseason? Has David Noble said how he plans to use him?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think these are things that we'll be waiting on.
No, I don't think so. And we've just got this really short memory in the fantasy footy community. I don't expect him to go back to do what he did in 2019. But if he gets anywhere near that in Dream Team and SuperCoach, it's one of the value picks of the year. That year, he averaged just off 90. In fact, it was 90 across all formats of the game. 9 Dream Team and AFL Fantasy tons, 3 over 120. It included a 145 and a 155, 3 additional scores of 90 plus. So half of the year in Dream Team and Fantasy, he's going 90 plus. In SuperCoach, 10 tons, 6 of them were over 120. It included a 140 and a 133, another 4 scores above 80. I think 3 of them were 90 plus scores. And in the middle portion of 2019, he was the on fire forward that year, because from round 6 to round 16, he averaged 104 across all formats. Again, he doesn't have to do that, but he was doing this 18 months ago. And you look over his career that you alluded to, just the past 6 years, these are his averages in Dream Team and Fantasy. Again, not including 2020, 95, 84, 90, 95, 94, and 82 in SuperCoach, 95, 83, 86, 94, 89, and 84. And he doesn't have this history of big injury layoffs. You might, there's a couple in there, a medial and a couple of hammies and a couple of corkies. Not a great year for him. But outside of that, he played every game in 2019 and 2018. He played 19 games in 2017. And then between 2016 and 2015, he only missed 1 game. So you're really talking about a handful of missed games in 5 years. So he's got relative history of durability. Even when he plays a split forward and mid-roll, he looks like an 80s guy across your formats. And he's priced for us in SuperCoach about 50K more than Jamari Ugle-Hagan and like 100K more than an Elijah Hollins in Dream Team. I just see this guy. You're right. The question is, what does he need to do to get picked in your side? Get through the preseason unscathed. Like, if he does that for me, sure, the role's going to maybe, tilt me a little either side in those 2 formats. But if he gets through the preseason unscathed, gosh, it's going to be hard not to pick him.
Yeah, totally agree, MJ. The last time I checked, he's still the captain of the North Melbourne Football Club.
Yeah.
So I know, as I said it in the Wayne Miller one, a guy at this price that has a scoring history, like, those guys aren't usually best 22, let alone the captain of the club. And could 2020 have been more tumultuous for Jack Ziebell? He couldn't get on the park, and when he did, half of his games almost ended with him on the bench.
Yeah.
The club played horrible football outside of the first few rounds.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the coach had to step down due to personal issues.
Yeah.
Like, that is it. And also, we're dealing with a global pandemic, being away from your family. Geez, can we just not maybe wipe the table clean and say, hey, nothing went their way?
No,
nothing went their way. And the main thing in salary cap is we're not asking him to get back to his best.
No.
We're just asking him to be a very solid, honestly, mid-70s type of guy. And he's done his job. You can play on. Again, the only way I don't see this fitting in to your side is if we have so many cash cows that we don't even need mid-prices.
Yeah.
Like, if we've got so many good cows that the rest of our cash can just be used to pick the premiums that we want for the whole year.
Yeah.
That's how I think a Jack Ziebell doesn't make your side.
Yep.
Will that happen? I'd be really surprised. I feel like we always start the preseason with, Will Gould will play and Jez McLennan will be in the sun side the whole time and he'll still average 65. But really, even if you're a top pick, you don't just walk into AFL sides in this day and age. It is very hard to get, we're going to be talking MJ. If we want to have Jack Ziebell not be relevant in our starting side, we need probably 12 to 15 cows. Like, that's the type of level that we need to be seeing, which is just unlikely. So really, I think it's that simple. Watch him in the preseason. Your eyes will tell you all you need to know.
If he gets through it unscathed, it's fine. Does he need to be in that midfield of Cunnington, Simpkin, Anderson, LDU, all on the end, most of them? Plus those 2 draftees that you were alluded to, those high picks of Phillips and Powell, a couple of rotations. Is he going to be needed inside that forward 50 line to support the likes of Larkey? Yeah, he actually is. There's been some talk of him playing in defense. Is that needed? Look, honestly, I don't see it. With Aiden Core coming back in there, I don't see the need for that. But if it happens, cool. Okay. I don't think that's the thing. Where do you want Ziebell? You want him using that overhead contested marking that he's really strong in, and you want him in and under the packs, and using that hopeful still burst of speed that he's got from stoppage that has those moments where early in his career, he and Patrick Dangerfield were contrasted a lot in terms of that quick burst, first touch out of stoppage and run away. If he can get anywhere near a 75 plus, like you said, it's a win. And if he gets near 2019 where he's a 90 guy, you've just got one of the bargains of the year. So I think you're right. I think in salaries, AFL fantasy, he's priced irrelevant for us. You just can't do it, and that's okay. Dream Team and SuperCoach. Dream Team, you probably need more cows than you do in SuperCoach. At SuperCoach, he's a high-end cow. He and Joe Danaher, who he talked about in the 50 most relevant. Drafts is an interesting one, though, Kane. Do you put a lot of faith in what he did in 19, 18, 17? Or knowing that people will probably draft based on last year's averages, he would slide, wouldn't he?
Yeah, you'd love him to be your F6. And what I mean with that, obviously, is your bench player.
Yeah.
Because in the dream scenario, if your draft league allows it, he's the perfect loophole player.
Yeah.
You bring him on, you put him on the bench, you see what he scores. If he scores great, you loophole the player on.
Yep.
If not, you put someone else. 75 MJ is usually our line for our 50th forward, isn't it? Yep. Really. Which is about where I've got him. What's the upside? It seems like in the role he'll get, it's probably going to be low 80s. Is probably the best I can hope for, realistically.
Yeah.
So really, if you took him at your F5 position, which again is probably, for me, honestly, it might be 18th round. It's probably my last starting position in a draft on field. Maybe it's 16th if I've also got defenders. It's not great. I'm not jumping at it, but if he's in that pack with, a bunch of other guys that are sort of around the same mark, he probably has more upside than them most of the time. And he's definitely got the job security.
Yes.
Obviously the body's a concern. Again, he's not a massive make or break because if he breaks at where you've probably got him for, you just throw him back to the pool and grab someone off the waiver wire. He'd probably have to go 85 plus, then you'd be feeling really good. He's probably, gone from an F5 to an F3. But really, it's not super bad if you miss him.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world if you grabbed him in round 14. I don't think it's going to kill you.
No.
Again, same thing with a lot of these guys. When they're really cheap in salary, there's usually a push, especially if there's a good preseason game.
Yep.
Now, if he came out in the preseason and he's a full mid and Cunnington's back's aggravated and Jed Anderson has an injury or LDU, he probably would rise a few rounds for me. But at this present time, I think he's a late teens pick, your last sort of spot, F5. What about you?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same, man. If F5's the earliest I'm reaching, and then if I can get him 1 or 2 rounds later, that's the ideal, because the upside, there's no risk at that point. Let's be honest. If you think back to draft day and you're thinking your F5s, if you keep them, that's a win, let alone if they pop an 80 plus average like he could. So I think at that point in the draft, your late teens, you're just taking flyers and hopes. And if you need to, you move them quickly onto the waiver wire.
Do you see him being a guy in a keeper league that could maybe have a little bit of value if he does play pretty well? Because really, he's probably not going to have many years left of relevance. And if you're fighting for a flag, it's sometimes not the worst thing to have, that backup F5, F6 that you can sort of rotate through. I don't see how he'd be keepable really in too many list lodgements, but maybe in a redraft, if you're set elsewhere, MJ, if you're keeping, let's say you're keeping 20 players, so there's no intention for Ziebell to actually ever see the field if everything goes well. Yeah. Maybe in the 3rd to 5th round of a redraft, you just take that fly up, fingers crossed the upside hits.
Absolutely. Because in the equivalent of a single draft, that's pick 23, 24, 25.
Yeah.
So it's
I just feel
perfectly reasonable. So
I think obviously you've got the weight to the younger guys, but
hey,
if you're in that premiership window,
go.
Again, it's not much risk, again, being on the bench with the potential upside. So maybe that's where people can just keep a sneaky eye on him. Hey, this could be a guy that, could be a valuable on-field player for me.
Yeah, it could be a 10, 15 points per game increase on what you're already pocketed away in your forward lines. Hey, mate, appreciate your thoughts today on Jack Ziebell.
No worries.
If you want to go back and read the article, it's got a little bit more in-depth thoughts on him. You can go and check that out at coachespanel.tv, our number 34 player in the 50 most relevant. You can also, while you're there, read all the other players. You can find all the links to get involved in our Patreon supporter group, where you get early access to these podcasts and additional exclusive access content. We'll be back tomorrow, number 33 in the 50 most relevant. I don't normally like to give clues about who we've got, but I'll give you one this. We're heading to the opposite end of the ground. He was a real popular pick towards the back of the year. But is he a popular pick to start this year?